Prologue 1800s. The Barlow farmhouse loomed against the Ohio sky, a weathered sentinel of faded paint and dark secrets. Its windows, like lidless eyes, gazed out over sprawling fields that whispered to the wind. Beneath its time-worn facade lurked a darkness that defied mortal comprehension. As twilight descended, shadows twisted across the overgrown lawn. A solitary tree kept vigil, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. From its lowest bough hung a tire swing, swaying gently, mocking the notion of childhood innocence. The farmhouse exuded malevolence, an otherworldly presence seeping into the very soil. The air grew thick and oppressive, as if recoiling from the taint within those walls. Even the most skeptical observer would have sensed the wrongness permeating the property. For generations, the Barlow family had tended this land, their calloused hands coaxing life from the earth. They had weathered droughts and floods, pestilence and plenty, their resolve unyielding, yet they remained oblivious to the insidious force stirring within their midst. It was Jacob Barlow, the youngest member of the family, who first heeded the siren call of the arcane. Where his forebears found solace in farm life, Jacob's restless mind yearned for forbidden knowledge. He consumed esoteric volumes with obsessive fervor, his eyes glittering with unholy light as he pored over mysterious incantations. Whispers came to him in the dead of night, seductive promises of power that danced at the edges of his consciousness. His family pleaded with him to abandon these dangerous pursuits, their voices tinged with fear. But Jacob had already surrendered to the allure of the unknown. In the attic, amid dust and forgotten relics, Jacob performed his rituals. Candles guttered in the gloom, casting writhing shadows on walls that seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. The air grew thick with the acrid scent of burning herbs and spilled blood. With each passing night, the veil between worlds thinned, until at last it tore asunder. The entity that slipped through was ancient beyond reckoning, a formless malevolence that hungered for the vitality of the living. It latched onto the farmhouse like a parasite, its tendrils of corruption spreading through wood and stone. The house groaned and shuddered as the malignant presence took hold. At first, the changes were subtle. Objects moved inexplicably. Shadows lingered where no darkness should dwell. The temperature plummeted without warning, leaving breath hanging in the air like spectral mist. The Barlows dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the mind, clinging to rationality even as their world unraveled. But as the entity grew stronger, fed by fear and confusion, the manifestations became impossible to ignore. Doors slammed shut of their own accord. Disembodied voices echoed through empty hallways, whispering words of madness. The very walls began to bleed, crimson rivulets tracing obscene patterns across peeling wallpaper. One by one, the Barlows succumbed to the relentless assault on their sanity. Jacob's father was found gibbering in the barn, his eyes wild and unseeing. His mother retreated into catatonia, her vacant gaze fixed on some distant point beyond mortal understanding. Jacob's siblings fled into the night, their screams echoing across the fields as they were pursued by indescribable horrors. And through it all, Jacob Barlow remained, a broken vessel for the forces he had sought to control. His mind, once sharp and inquisitive, shattered like glass, leaving only jagged shards of consciousness, reflecting the madness that consumed him. He wandered the halls, a ghost among ghosts, his laughter mingling with the entity's mocking cackle. The land itself recoiled from the corruption at its heart. Crops withered and died, their stalks twisted into grotesque parodies of natural growth. Animals fled the surrounding fields, driven by instinctive terror. Those unfortunate creatures that remained were found days later, their bodies contorted in poses of agony. As years passed, the Barlow farmhouse became legend, whispered about in hushed tones by locals. Parents warned their children to stay away, spinning tales of horrors that awaited trespassers. But such warnings only piqued the curiosity of the young and foolhardy, who would sneak onto the grounds on moonless nights, daring each other to approach the decaying structure. Few who ventured too close emerged unscathed. Some returned with fractured minds, babbling about impossible geometries and faces that shifted like smoke. Others vanished without a trace, leaving behind only echoes of terrified screams. The lucky ones fled at the first sign of danger, vowing never to return. Yet the entity dwelling within the farmhouse remained unsatiated. It hungered for more victims, more souls to torment and devour. And so it waited, patient as only an immortal being can be, for the day when new residents would claim this cursed plot of land. For the entity knew that in time, memory would fade and warnings would be dismissed as mere superstition. When that day came, when unsuspecting souls crossed the threshold, the cycle of terror would begin anew. The entity would feast on their fear, their despair, their very essence, until nothing remained but hollow shells, mere puppets for its twisted amusement. The tire swing continued to sway, a silent sentinel to the horrors that lay in wait. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the farmhouse in deepening shadows, one could almost hear faint laughter carried on the wind, a sound neither fully human nor entirely of this world. In the attic, where Jacob had first torn open the veil between worlds, the air remained thick with the residue of dark magic. Dust-covered tomes lay scattered, their pages filled with forbidden knowledge that had cost the Barlow family everything. The floorboards creaked and groaned, straining against the weight of malevolence that had taken root. Ghostly figures flickered at the edges of perception, remnants of the Barlow family trapped in limbo. They wandered the halls, reliving their downfall in an endless loop of torment. Their anguished cries echoed through empty rooms, a haunting chorus that served as backdrop to the entity's presence. Outside, the land bore witness to the corruption. The once fertile soil had turned sour, unable to sustain life. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their bark blackened and peeling away to reveal pulsing vein-like structures beneath. Even the air seemed tainted, carrying the faint scent of decay and something older, something that had no place in the natural world. As night fell, the farmhouse took on an even more sinister aspect. Shadows deepened and writhed, taking forms that defied rational explanation. The windows glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light, as if the structure itself was alive and watching. Strange, discordant melodies drifted on the breeze, a cacophony of whispers and screams that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Throughout the farmhouse, time itself lost all meaning. Clocks ran backward or stood still, their hands occasionally spinning wildly before settling into impossible configurations. Seasons changed at random within the confines of the property, snow falling in summer, leaves bursting into autumnal colors in winter. And at the center of it all, in the attic where it had begun, Jacob Barlow's essence lingered. No longer fully human, he had become a conduit for the entity, his consciousness fractured across multiple planes of existence. In rare moments of lucidity, he would scream into the void, begging for release from the horror he had unleashed. But such moments were fleeting, soon swallowed by the all-consuming madness that now defined his existence. The entity reveled in the chaos it had wrought, its influence growing stronger with each passing day. It reached out beyond the farmhouse, tendrils of malevolence probing the surrounding countryside, seeking new victims to draw into its web of terror. Dreams in nearby Willows Bend grew dark and troubled as the entity's whispers seeped into subconscious minds. And still, the Barlow farmhouse stood, a cancer upon the land, waiting for the day when new souls would cross its threshold. For the entity knew that humans were creatures of short memory and insatiable curiosity. In time, the warnings would be forgotten, the tales of horror dismissed as mere legend. And when that day came, when unsuspecting victims stepped onto the property, ignorant of the doom that awaited them, the cycle would begin anew. The tire swings swayed gently in the breeze, a silent invitation to those who might pass by. And in the deepening twilight, as shadows lengthened and the boundary between worlds grew thin, the Barlow farmhouse waited, patient and eternal, for its next victims to arrive.